This is Mark Hughes with Karma Talks, where we encourage conversations for a better you and a better we. Today we have Dr. Sherif Abdullah, the author of the book, Creating a World That Works for All. And we're going to be talking with Sherif about how we have come from this place, from an old consciousness that's got us into a little bit of trouble, and moving into a new world of inclusivity, a consciousness of inclusivity that will really make the difference in creating change. Welcome, Sherif.
Well, good to be here.
Great. So tell us a little bit about what you do with Common Way and this mission.
Well, the mission is, as you said, societal transformation. How do we take what we've got right now and move it into where we need to be in our future? How do we move from a world that is dominated by exclusivity? Exclusivity meaning I'm separate from you. I'm separate from, I separate from people. We separate from each other based on race or skin color. We separate from each other based on gender and sexual orientation. We separate from each other based on age. We separate from each other based on how much money we've got in the bank. And all these are things that affect our minds, affect our relationships with others. And it's time for us to end the delusion of separation. And it's time for us to start creating a society that actually can work for all living beings.
So has this been something, this exclusivity and this degree of separation, has this always been the case, or has it evolved over time? How has that evolution taken place?
Well, human beings have lived on this planet for over 1 million years. And during that 1 million-year history, we lived as an integral part of our planet. We didn't live beyond the carrying capacity of our environment. We lived at peace and harmony with our neighbors most of the time. We lived in peace and harmony with ourselves most of the time. And something happened roughly around 10 or 12,000 years ago. And we don't know what happened. And it doesn't matter what happened. What matters is we started having a different kind of consciousness. Instead of I am one with the earth, it's I am above the earth. The earth is just basically my play box and my cesspool and my piggy bank. And we need to stop that kind of thinking. The kind of thinking that allows me to say, I'm separate from you, and therefore I can do anything I want to do to you. I can kill you, I can enslave you, I can do anything I want to do to you, and nothing comes back to me. That notion of separation, that separated thinking, is the thing that's gotten us on the brink right now, and has been accelerated in this country by the events of the recent election. Although I have to hasten to add that Donald Trump, to me, is a symptom of the problem. He's not the problem himself. If Trump were not elected, we still would have a massive problem. And so what we have to do is start looking at how we find massive solutions.
So we're going to come back to that, because that's a really good point. I agree with you. I think in many respects, the election of Donald Trump is a blessing for all of us, because it's really kind of, got us to wake up and see that we've got to make some changes. So that's a positive thing. But in terms of this escalation of this degree of separateness, is there something that maybe perhaps prompted that or encouraged that, or where did that sort of shift take place, if anything, and what was the fuel behind it? Do you have any thoughts about that?
Again, it's really hard to say. If as soon as I invent a time machine, I'm going to go back there and figure this out.
Yeah.
But the notion of sedentary agriculture brought in a notion of scarcity. Before that, we reckon the whole earth is abundant, and and we always had a relationship to our food and our food sources. And once we started saying, no, this part is mine and it's not anybody else's, we started getting into started fostering separation thinking.
So we actually go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, that could have been it.
Yeah.
But there may have been some other things around the same time that were creating that.
Well, it makes sense that we went from a community concept, food gatherers all working together. Everybody have a role in working together and bringing their talents and their skills or their jobs together to build the community. And then that separation going into basically a sense of isolation where people, basically went off and did their own thing and didn't need the cooperation of the community.
Yep. And right now, we can still see people who are living the values of our ancestors. We call them natives, we call them indigenous people, but they were our first civilization. And that first civilization had the values of honoring and protecting the earth as a being. And we walked away from that, of honoring and protecting each other and protecting our livelihood, our food sources, our environment, and we walked away from that. I think that we need to start walking back towards some of this stuff and not necessarily run around in loincloths. I don't advocate that, especially for me. But to really start looking at what are the values of how beings actually live on this planet, and work with that.
So, what would you say are some of the characteristics or some of the outcomes of the two different philosophies? The natives that we're talking about, the native communities that are valuing community, that are valuing the earth, versus those. Let's take America, for example, the capitalistic way, the very much about rise to the top. It's all about me, it's about my success. Where do you see the difference, and where does the conflict come in between those two value systems?
Well, I think that you can see this with almost every instance of first contact between what I call the first civilization, the indigenous people, and those who were operating from separatist, I am separate thinking. In the case of the Puritans, or in the case of Columbus, the indigenous people welcomed them with open arms, and the conquerors came in and slaughtered. And they thought nothing about the slaughter because I'm separate from those people. And you can take that attitude and bring it all the way forward to what's happening right now in our cities with the number of police shootings, the number of police shootings of everyone, and especially African Americans. The way that we are using large parts of the earth as basically resource dumps so that we can strip mine resources from it and not care anything about the land or the people that are under those resources. And so our challenge is, how do we start actually waking up to what I believe to be our true values and our true way of looking at the world? Because if we don't, there's not going to be a world for us to be looking at. What I define it as a problem of consciousness. So the three different types of consciousness are keepers, breakers, and menders. The keepers are the people who we just finished talking about, the indigenous people, the first civilization. These are the people who keep to sacred ways. These are the people who keep the covenant with the earth and with each other and with all other beings. The breakers are the folks who break all of that, okay? Who basically say, I'm not a part of the earth, I'm on top of the earth. And I can take all of the earth's resources, including other human beings. So it's okay for me to enslave another human being. It's okay for me to go and drop a bomb on another human being because they're not me. Then there's the third consciousness, the third type of consciousness. And I would like to think that you and I and the people watching this are part of that consciousness, or it's the consciousness of the menders. We know the breakers. We went to breaker schools. We learned the breaker way of looking at the world. But because we're looking at videos just like this, people are trying to figure out, how do I live this life differently? How do I live this life for my children? How do I live this life for my family? How do we do this in a very different way? And that's the thing that I think that's going to save the human race, and it's also going to save our planet. That's the direction that I see us going in.
That's fascinating. So, and when it comes to the breakers, are they fueled by, would you say, fear, by greed? I mean, what is it that's causing them to make the conscious choice to break from the value system?
I think you nailed it. It's fear. It's fear of the earth, that the earth isn't going to give itself to us, and therefore I'm going to control the earth. I'm going to put a fence around my part. I'm going to throw chemicals and fertilizer in the ground to make the plants grow. I'm going to put there only the stuff that I want to grow there. I'm going to kill everything else. This is total breaker consciousness, okay? And it's also fear of each other. So I'm going to put a wall up between my people and those people over there, and that wall will protect me because I'm afraid of those people over there.
No, but where did that kick in? I mean, do you have a sense of what caused that sense of fear that we have? And that's the challenge that we have all the way around the world that's going on today. I mean, we look at, yes. I'm amazed at how we decide foreign policy and whatever, and it's based on fear. Mm-hmm. And my sense is why are we not working to sort of collaborate more? Why are we working to come together instead of this unknown sense of fear that's causing us to push away and to retaliate?
Everything that we do that causes us to push away and retaliate from our foreign policy or our military policy turns bad. It turns into a problem. Everything that we do that brings people together and supports people turns good. It turns into something that's really worthwhile. If I can tell you a quick story, and I forget the year that they had the really bad earthquake in Pakistan, and it was in the mountainous regions of Pakistan, really hard to get up there. And so there wasn't a whole lot that anybody could do about it. And our government wasn't even particularly interested in doing a lot about it. But they had these old mobile army surgical hospital tents. And these are hospitals that they drop out of airplanes. And they were old. They were about to throw them in a garbage dump. And they said, well, why don't we just throw them on Pakistan instead? And maybe they can make some use of it. So they parachuted these tents down into the earthquake region. And people opened them up, and they had everything they needed. They had scalpels, they had bandages, they had alcohol, they had everything they needed. And in that region of Pakistan, you can't find anyone who says anything bad about Americans, because those people will say, Americans saved my child's life, okay? And the amount of effort that we put into it was close to zero. Now, you look at all of the weapons that we've got and all of the ways of killing each other that we've got. If we invested 1/2 of 1% of that 1/2 of 1% of to invest it in a mender way would be the thing that would actually heal the earth, would heal our relationships with the earth. I mean, I really support the idea of bombing North Korea, but I think we should bomb them with bread. I think we should bomb them with radios. I think we should bomb them with medicine, and let their government protest that we're feeding their people. And that will cost a fraction of us sending aircraft carriers around and threatening people. That's the difference between a breaker consciousness and a mender consciousness.
So how much of this do you think this is run by the escalation of big business influencing our governments? We had John Perkins on a show earlier, and he talked about how the evolution in corporate America went from, being of great service to a place that their total emphasis was all about the bottom line and moving in that direction. And that causes us to compromise on our values and some of the decisions we make. So, and I'm a firm believer in capitalism, but the greed factor is kicked in, and we are so hugely influenced by, money and that sort of thing. Is there any play in that in terms of our corporate environment having an impact on all this?
Yeah, I think that our economic system has morphed away from anything that you would call even remotely capitalistic. I don't think that it has a name anymore. I call it global corporatism. And that is like taking separation thinking and putting it on steroids. I mean, it's a force that's driving the entire world right now. And this force that's driving the world is not alive. It's not a human force. It's not a moral force. It doesn't die. It continues to consume. It only gets bigger and bigger. It never has, it has the values of whatever values it can get away with. Okay. And so, putting a bell on that cat is going to be really, really interesting. It is clearly the tail that wags the dogs of government. Basically, and John talks about this in his writings, basically our government is going around making the world safe for this corporate transnational interest to go out and rape the world. And I want to hasten to say, though, I've talked with a number of the people in these corporate settings, and they can be decent human beings doing indecent things. There can be very smart, intelligent people doing unintelligent, stupid things because it's their job.
Well, routine and structure and history of things, and this is how we've done it. And, you look at a lot of industries that are sort of stuck in a routine. You look at the insurance industry, you look at, you can name many that, this is the way we've done it, and this is the way we're going to continue to do it, because changing that and moving in a different direction brings up fear and hesitation about really the impact, the results, and ultimately probably the bottom line.
Yeah.
Right.
And the I am separate thinking is I want something that's going to be good for me and for my friends, and basically screw everybody else. And it doesn't matter if it destroys the happiness of the whole, as long as I get my way, as long as I get my little way of doing things. Our problem is compounded by something I call crystallized consciousness. And crystallized consciousness is the consciousness that we put into our codes, we put into our building codes, our city codes, etc. And this is the thinking of how to do things 100 years ago, or 200 years ago, 300 years ago. How do we do things right now? Well, we can't seem to let go of the city code. And once we do that, we could solve the housing crisis in Portland and every other city overnight. We can build these little tiny houses, and we can build them out of cob, we can build them out of cordwood, we can build them out of any resource. People can build their own houses, they can start feeling self-confident and resilient, etc. But the code will not let you do that. And so the housing crisis isn't a real crisis. It's a crisis caused by our consciousness. The economic crises, the world crises are simply caused by our consciousness. And it's going to take a change of consciousness on all of our parts to make the change actually happen.
Well, that's a great segue. We're going to take a break. We'll be right back. Please come back and join us, because we're going to be talking about how we can get how the menders can have hope in converting and or assisting those that are needing to come and join us. The breakers, right? The breakers?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the breakers. And then we'll talk a little bit about the impact of Donald Trump and what that means to us in terms of the next step in our evolution towards creating inclusivity. So we'll be right back.
There are many kinds of buzzes in this world. Some buzzes are good. Some buzzes are bad. And some are really bad. But the buzz you get from Guayaquil yerba mate is good. Exceptionally good. Because hot or cold, mate is not your typical caffeine drink. It doesn't just wake you up, it helps you come to life. Filled with vitamins, amino acids, and antioxidants, it's healthy for you like tea. And it tastes great. Mate contains theobromine, the same mood-elevating compound found in chocolate. And like coffee, it picks you up and gives you clarity. But it's less acidic, so it's easier on your stomach. But perhaps most impressive is Guayaquil yerba mate's ability to put an end to this buzz. Over 95% of South America's Atlantic rainforest, the native home of yerba mate, has been cut down for hardwoods, to grow GMO crops, and to raise cattle. But Guayaquil's restorative business model is helping to protect the remaining 5% of Atlantic rainforest by sustainably harvesting organic mate in the shade of its native environment, proving that the rainforest is worth more to everyone standing than it is cut down. Guayaquil partners with small farmers and indigenous people who are committed to caring for the forest, and harvesters are paid a fair wage. This stable annual income offers local communities a real alternative to the destructive industrial model. When money grows on trees, no one cuts them down. And Guayaquil's way doesn't just halt rainforest destruction. It's regenerative, and it's on track to restore over 200,000 acres in the next 10 years. So while there's no way to avoid all of life's bad buzzes, you can always choose the drink that gives you a good buzz you can feel great about. Guayaquil yerba mate. Come to life.
Hi, welcome back. We're with Dr. Sherif Abdullah, and we're going to explore now how the menders can influence the breakers, and what needs to happen to make those breakers, to encourage the breakers to move more into a level of inclusivity. So, Sherif, how does that work? How is that possible? What do we need to do?
Well, I think that what we need to do is sitting right in front of us, and we tend not to want to see it. I think what we have to do is create a new structure based on a new consciousness. We can see elements of that coming together, but we don't have the overarching meta vision around what that structure would look like.
When you talk about structure, what are you talking about? Are you talking about government? Are you talking about changing cultural norms? What are you speaking of in terms of the structure?
I'm talking about the whole thing. Mm-hmm. I'm talking about the way that we see our society is based on the consciousness that we've got. It's based on our consciousness of separation, our consciousness of exclusivity. When we go back and look at the American Revolution, for most people, all they wanted was a better deal from the king. They wanted a little bit more freedom. They wanted a little bit less restriction, etc. But our founders had a different idea, and the different idea was we can have a governing structure that doesn't need a king. Now, at that time, 300 years ago, that was an amazingly radical idea. This was, in fact, it was so radical, people couldn't even comprehend it. They just wanted to make Washington the king. Okay, we'll have a king, it'll be George Washington. And it's like, no, we're really talking about a thing where we can govern each other by ourselves, by the people. And they called it democracy. Well, that was the radical big idea of the time. So what we need now is a radical big idea.
So give me an example. I'm gonna throw this at you.
Yeah.
Give me an idea. What is this radical new idea?
Okay, so
paint the picture.
So here's the consciousness question. Okay, for most people, the hundreds of thousands of people that come out, millions of people around the world protesting Donald Trump, this is the consciousness that says, I don't want that guy over there. And if we don't have that guy over there, he's the problem. If we don't have that guy over there, then all the problems go away. What I have to recognize is that I am a carrier of the disease. I was trained in exclusivity. I have to get rid of it in myself first before I start pointing my fingers at anybody else. I have to get rid of it myself first. Then I've got to join with the people who are saying, yes, I agree with you. Let us do that. And then ask the question, what is it can we do based on what is needed right now to change the society that we are in? How can we create the seed? How can we be the seed? How can we be the imaginal cells of a butterfly that's about to birth itself? I don't know if you know Barbara Marx Hubbard.
Certainly.
But she has this great analogy of what is the difference between something that is breaking down or breaking through. We keep talking about and looking at societal breakdown, but I believe it's leading us into a completely new direction, a direction as audacious, as radical as this notion that we don't need a king, that we don't need a corporation, we don't need to have these inhuman entities delivering our food, delivering our communications, delivering our water. What we can do is we can figure out how human beings, in cooperation with all other beings, can do these things for ourselves.
And that's the conscious choice.
And that means having a choice based in mindfulness, based in consciousness, based in how do all of us together exercise the common good. And if I can give you one example, and somebody highlighted this for me some years ago. William Penn, when he came to the New World, had this idea of the ideal society, and he put two experiments in motion. One of them was his city, Philadelphia, the city of brotherly love. Well, that one went down the tubes pretty quick. I can say that because I was born in Philly.
Be careful.
Yeah, right. But the second experiment that he put in place was the Amish country, or the Pennsylvania Dutch country, and that experiment is still going strong after 300 plus years. That actually the Amish country is getting bigger. It's getting there's more people there, and that's a function of people actually understanding that there's something more to life than I'm going to make as much money as I possibly can. The Pennsylvania Dutch country is the largest tourist draw in Pennsylvania. 10 million people a year go there just to see people living a peaceful lifestyle, just to see what life would be like if we didn't have all this stuff and flat screen TVs and SUVs and everything else. Okay. And
they're curious.
I think they're more than curious.
Yeah.
I think that they are hungry. And I think that what they're hungry for is community, connection, a sense of belonging, and a sense that my work and my suffering, my actions are important not only to me, not only important to my family, but important to the world. I think that we're looking for that, and we're not able to find it inside of breaker society. But I think that we will be finding it as we begin to create other societies and linking them together into a new world.
So you said earlier that the shift that we all have to make on an individual basis. Mm-hmm. It's kind of hard for the menders at times. I would consider myself a mender. Yeah. It's hard at times when there's so many breakers out there, right? And you elect a breaker and you get frustrated and whatever. So, and again, we're in agreement that Donald Trump is just an opportunity for us to make a shift in our consciousness. He's bringing it to the forehead. So can you be specific and tell us what are some specific things that people can do, that menders can do, or the breakers can do to make the shift towards being a mender? What are some things that we can take responsibility for and make the change?
Well, the first thing is to be willing to take responsibility, and to be willing to take responsibility not just for me and my friends. I could have written a book called Creating a World That Works for Me and My Friends. That would have been a very popular book. But really to recognize that if it doesn't work for all, you're barking up the wrong tree. To recognize the difference between reality and media events. The media wants us to look at the world a certain way, and to look at the world through the eyes of breakers. The media wants us to be afraid because fear sells newspapers. Fear sells clicks on the news feeds. And I made a decision to not be afraid. And all of us can make that decision and can turn down the sound on the stuff that is asking us to be more and more afraid.
And do what? And do what? I mean, that's one thing I got people that say, I don't watch the news anymore.
Right.
I'm not sure that if everybody just took their head and put it in the sand, we'd get where we need to be. So,
well, then the next thing is to engage in the vision of what does our world actually look like? What does the world that works for all actually look like? Most of us don't think about that. This is the thing that, again, our founders were saying, what does our society look like? They got some parts of it really right and some parts of it really wrong, okay? But they engaged in that conversation. And we need to engage in that conversation with our friends, but we also need to engage in that conversation with the other. And I have been in rooms of the people who are lamenting the Trump presidency. I've also been in the rooms and talking with the people where 99% of them voted for him. Okay, and by talking directly to them, and I do not mean the racist yahoos like the Nazis and the Ku Klux Klan. That's what the media pushes at us to say that's a Trump supporter. Well, yeah, they did support Trump. But the people who actually got him elected were people who are not ideological. They're not, what they're looking for is change because they know that it's not working for them. And they know that Hillary Clinton wasn't talking about that. And hey, this guy over here with the funny hairdo, he's talking about it. Maybe he can give us some relief from the suffering that we're experiencing right now.
And we're willing to roll the dice and give it a try, because I think there's a place where, when you step to that place of hopelessness, where you really get to the point where, I just don't know how we're going to pull out of this, you become a little bit more eager to make those changes that we talked about earlier. And so that's part of the group that elected Trump.
Yeah. So people are ready for a fundamental change, and their leaders aren't offering it to them. So that means we have to be the leaders that offer it to them. And that means that we have to understand what that fundamental change is. The right doesn't have it. The left doesn't have it. The middle doesn't have it. We need to have a transformational thought. As I tell folks, when we're looking at the transformation from the caterpillar to the butterfly, okay, the butterfly is not a caterpillar with wings. It is a fundamentally different being. And that model for what a fundamentally changed society looks like is right in our hearts. All we have to do is engage in a process of asking each other, what did you see? What did you see? What part of this are you seeing? Let's bring these parts together. Let's test them out. Let's see what happens here. And learn from each other, learn from our successes, and most importantly, learn from our mistakes. One of the problems of the Occupy movement of several years ago, one of the problems that they had is that they refused to learn. I'm sitting here with literally decades of experience in social change. Nobody's talking to me. I'm waving, hey, I'm over here. I'm willing to work with you for free, and nobody's talking. My friend, the late Grace Lee Boggs in Detroit, 100 years old and 70 years of activism. And she said, they won't talk to me because they think they know it all. And obviously from the effects of what happened with Occupy, they didn't know it all. They didn't know nearly enough. And so we talk to each other and we come up with a coherent vision, not for social change, but the vision of what it is that we want our society to look like. I'll give you one more quick story. Václav Havel wrote the former president of the Czech Republic, wrote the introduction to my book and invited me to Prague several times to work with him on some things. And he tells a story about being a prisoner in a Soviet prison. And he was a prisoner because of his political statements. And so he's pushing the laundry carts around in the prison, and he sees another guy, and the other guy is also a prisoner. And they've got 5 minutes that they can talk to each other before the guards break them up. And so what do they talk about in that 5 minutes inside of a Soviet prison? They could talk about how bad the food is, how much they miss their wives, how unfair it is for them to be there. But for 5 minutes, they talk about the kind of society they're going to create when they get out of the prison. Havel was taken out of the prison and made the president of the country. The other guy was taken out of the prison, made the foreign secretary. Okay. So the question that I ask us, especially the people who are watching this, are you ready to be the president or the foreign secretary of another society, of a society that's actually based on the principle that the world can work for all beings, more than all human beings, but all beings. That instead of building more walls, we need to be taking the walls down.
Amazing. That's brilliant. So I know that you're starting a new project. You're going to be launching it here within this year. Do you want to tell us quickly about what that's about and how people can connect with you?
Yes. The bottom line is the name of the project is Releasing the Shadows, Embracing the Light. Our society, because of this exclusivist consciousness, has been built on negative energy. And I call those negative energies the shadows. And the 4 shadows that we're looking at are the shadow of violence, the shadow of the other that manifests itself as racism, sexism, etc., the shadow of lack, which manifests as poverty, greed, and hoarding, and the shadow of depression and despair that manifests itself in our unbelievable suicide rate and other aspects of depression. We can dispel them by actually going to the root of the shadow and changing the energy of it. And so this is energy work, and I know a lot of people know about energy work on their personal lives. It's time to take the energy work out into our collective lives, into our society, and that's what we're going to be doing. And
so how can people follow you and connect with you on this program as it evolves?
Well, you can go to my website, commonway.org. Commonway is all one word, .org. You can go to my Facebook page, Dr. Sherif Abdullah, and stay tuned. I'm hoping that this is going to be big enough that by the fall of 2017, you'll see signs of this being around and how you can join in the effort.
Well, let's all take a moment and just visualize that. Let's just see this evolving. Let's see the signs appearing. Let's see the energy happening. Let's see people stepping out and embracing this and recognizing that now's the time.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Good. I have one last question for you. If you were to be the ambassador of a specific cause, what would it be?
I think I am the ambassador of societal transformation. And people kind of chide me because I'm not an expert in anything, okay? The ecological crisis, the social crisis, the cultural crises, all of our political stuff. I know enough about all of them to see how they fit into this larger whole. And so a world for all becomes the meta vision from which all of these other visions can be connected if we have the consciousness to do so.
Well, I want to thank you so much for all that you do and the difference that you're making for, all of us, stepping out in the world and doing what you're passionate about. And I think it's a good reminder to recognize that what we focus on is what we manifest, and we have a choice, each and every one of us, to focus on the negative, to focus on those that are the breakers. And instead, what I'm hearing you to say, and what I'm hearing over and over again with the consciousness movement and the revolution that's taking place and the evolution of our awakening of spirit and of goodness and kindness around the world, that it's all about making a conscious choice to look to the good in the world and to reach out and to connect with people and to make the changes in our personal life that influence the lives of those around us. So this is Mark Hughes with Karma Talks. Thank you, Sherif, so much for joining us. And until next time, step out in the world and each and every day make a conscious choice to do something kind and compassionate for those around you. Have a great day. As we continue to explore conscious solutions to our world's most pressing problems, be a part of the conversation and subscribe to our Karma Talks channel. Thank you.